I mean, feminism for me definitely does not equal gender. Um, yeah, I guess for me, feminist thought and writing and conversations um, have helped me think more critically and imaginatively about how to not only how to make sense of the world, but what to do about all the things that don't make sense in the world, right? So, in some ways, um, feminist thinking around that has been helpful for me as a person and as a reader and as a student of politics and IR. But for me, it's never been just feminist. Like it's not feminism. It's always been post-colonial feminism. So it's not even intentional kind of looking for post-colonial feminists. It's just that after the fact, I realized that, oh, the specific writings that speak to me and give me life actually are feminists who are wrestling with um, the the complex ways in which power um, structures not just our individual lives, but the ways in which our lives are interconnected with others in history, um, and always being the latecomers to history. So I guess for me, that's what feminism has been. But I've always, said I never really feel like uh, my definition of feminism as something that doesn't equal to gender is um, the proper feminist, right? It's always like there's feminism and then there's like not so good feminist or the ugly feminist or like not up to date feminist. And and I think that sort of constant questioning of what exactly is the relationship between gender and feminism um, allows all these illegitimate forms or thoughts and questions to go beyond sort of the legitimate and illegitimate um, binary, right? Because the world that we live in, um, there are definitely people who are legitimate um, and those who are not. And that's by design. It reveals to me that we don't know this thing called the nuclear world. um, and that we're just beginning to trace um, what, when the nuclear world started and what the afterworld of nuclear politics is. I mean, for me, it's so tied to our rethinking around militarism and Cold War politics. Um, and yeah, all these things. It's not just, I don't think we can understand what the nuclear world is without, or re-see it without also trying to re-see other sort of related concepts that we think we already know what they mean. And so I think here, actually, for me, the most productive person to be thinking with about the nuclear world and feminist lens has been Persia Tewa's work. We don't really necessarily think of her as an expert of, a feminist who works on nuclear politics, right? But actually, the way she tried to push the concept of militarism as something that is organic rather than an ism that is structural, um, I think really for me has been helpful to think about, well, what is involved in denuclearization? It's not a rational agreement-based process. It's about like um, how do we deal with our addiction to power? How do we deal with the fact that our lives are so interconnected with the military as a career option or as a possibility of how we feel safe or whatever it is, right? That it's so complicated because these things that we these things that we think are just simply structural are actually quite organic. So the articulated limb argument that Tewa makes about militarism, I think is so helpful for us to kind of get to, um, yeah, what is it going to take for us to move beyond to denuclearize? It's going to be painful. Like it's not going to be just painful for the the nuke, Hawks. Is going to be painful for the feminist in us. The problem isn't out in the world. The nuclear problem isn't just simply out in the international out there. The nuclear problem is in us.